We are Forestry!
And this is the UPLB-CFNR channel.
This webinar is part of FDC's Forest Policy e-Talks webinar series. So before we start off, I would like to read to you our house rules for today's webinar. Okay, so for the house rules, here are the following. If you wish to speak, you may click the raise hand button on the Zoom app, okay, and then we will recognize you. Only unmute your microphone if you are given the signal to speak. Questions will be asked via the Q&A tab, which is in your Zoom account or Zoom app, or via the comment sections in our Facebook page. By the way, our Facebook page, we are broadcasting it live via FDC's Facebook page, Forestry Development Center, CFNR UPLB. So please like and share our live stream. Then after you ask the question, please indicate your unit or organization before you ask the question. To inform you, this whole webinar is being recorded for documentation purposes. So the video, as I've told you, is also live in our Facebook page. After the webinar, you will be redirected to the post-evaluation Google form. So we may collect your assessment, and then afterwards, e-certificates will be distributed. So, before I start off the program, I'd like to show to you the flow for today's event. So, first, we'll have our welcome remarks, and then the introduction of the speaker, and then the actual presentation. Then we'll have our open forum, which is your avenue for your questions. And then lastly, we'll present the e-certificate to the speaker and the closing remarks. So to start off, I would like to call on our director, Dr. Priscilla Dolom, to give the welcome remarks.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the staff of the Forestry Development Center, or FDC, and the members of the REPS Division 4, we would like to welcome you to our Forest Policy e-Talks FDC Webinar Series 2020. Today, we'll be having the first of the FDC's webinar series in collaboration with the REPS Division 4, headed by Forester Leilani Castillo. As a brief backgrounder, the Forestry Development Center, or FDC, is one of the research and extension units of the College of Forestry and Natural Resources, UPLB. FDC was created by law by Presidential Decree 705 in 1975, mandated to conduct policy researches in forestry, natural resources, and environment. We were also established to help develop an effective machinery for forest policy formulation and implementation through seminars, forums, symposium, conferences, among others. Considering the present situation that we are experiencing due to pandemic, the FDC has shifted to conducting policy forums, seminars, in an online venue like a webinar. This is to continue our commitment to deliver the mandate of the center. Today is the first of the Forest Policy e-Talks FDC Webinar Series 2020. It is good that when we invited Forester Leo Barua to share with us his expertise on Geographic Information System, he responded positively and was very much willing to serve as our resource person. Moreover, since the topic that Forester Barua will be discussing is very important in conducting environmental, natural resources, and policy researches, we tried to collaborate with Forester Leilani Castillo, the head of the REPS Division 4, and with the UPLB REPS Society. So with that as a backgrounder, again, on behalf of the FDC staff and the members of the Division 4 reps, we would like to welcome you all to the Forest Policy E-Talks FDC Webinar Series 2020. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Priscilla Dela, for the welcome remarks. So, moving on, before I introduce your speaker today, I'd like to remind that the house rules again, please refer to them. So, to introduce now um, our speaker for today is a professional forester with master's specialization on natural resource conservation. His works involving geographic information systems started in 2007 at the Environmental Remote Sensing NGO Information Laboratory. After a short involvement with Ready Project with Pag-asa in 2008, he continued working at ERSG for various GIS and remote sensing projects. In 2009, he was involved with World Bank's post-disaster damage assessment for typhoons Ondoy and Pepeng. From 2010 to 2012, he joined the World Bank team for conducting trainings to various local governments around the country for pilot testing DRRM streamlining to their respected land use plans. His master's thesis revolved on using spatial technologies, GIS, and remote sensing for prioritizing conservation efforts targeting forest degradation. In recent years, Leo started working with UAS and photogrammetry technologies for enhancing and supplementing traditional satellite-based analysis. His works with drones include forestry canopy gap assessment and vegetation recolonization following a landslide event. Our speaker also presented in various national and international conferences about works he was involved in on GIS and remote sensing. So without further ado, I would like to welcome and introduce to you our speaker, Mr. Leo Barua from the Makiling Center for Mountain Ecosystems. Sir Leo?
Hi, good morning. Yan. I'll start my presentation now. I'll share the PowerPoint. Okay, good morning. This is quite a new experience, so please bear with me. I'm here to talk about GIS towards policy and decision making. However, I'm no policy expert, so I'll just share what I think GIS can contribute to it. Before we start, I'd like to share a quick story. There was one time I went to the grocery after learning that I'm diabetic, and for the first time, I really read the contents of that little box at the back of the milk carton and compare which of the two brands have lower sugar content. Now, I was making an informed decision there. I have a set of requirements in my mind, and I am to choose a product that better suit my criteria. This is an example of a problem solved by a simple one-level elimination process. Now, can you imagine if you were to decide if you were to build your home? What questions or criteria come to mind? Now, how can you make an informed decision? My topic for today's talk is on geographic information systems and how it can contribute to decision and policy making. I know that the audience have been expanded, and I have adjusted the talking points a bit to encompass a wider range of us reps in various fields. I am here to promote appreciation of GIS and its applications, as well as to give you guys a peek of the geographic approach of tackling problems that are spatial in nature. When we hear GIS for the first time, what is the first thing that comes to mind? It's a map, right? But is that GIS all about? What GIS is all about? Yes? No? Well, if it is, then the map should be teaching kids GIS and Dora should be an expert. And mapping is deeply intertwined with GIS, and cartography is the way to do it. Cartography is the science and an art form, and I think now is an essential part of GIS. This is usually seen as a product of mapping or GIS activities, and hence have more significant impact in communicating results of a GIS analysis. So what really is a GIS? GIS is something larger actually. It can combine data from various sources and formats and is able to perform analysis across the various types of data. How can GIS do this? In GIS, data is represented as layers. We usually refer to them as themes. And a dataset's theme can be administrative boundaries. Another dataset's theme could be land cover, and another dataset's theme is road network, and so on. We can have as many layers as we need for the type of assessment that we are doing. But how then is it different from stacking paper maps on a table? The answer is the attribute table. Each theme contains more than the spatial characteristics of the dataset. It also includes attributes. When we say attributes, these are data that are usually not related to space. For example, shape features outlining administrative boundaries in, for example, here in Los Baños, are seen on the map as polygons. However, its attribute table can contain a variety of other data such as names of, for example, mayors, of barangay officials, population, and land area, which on its own are just mere tabular data. Now, GIS brings together these types of data, attribute and spatial, to enable GIS users to make richer information as more themes are combined. We'll get to data combining later. As mentioned earlier, GIS transforms data into information. Hence, data is one component of GIS. What do you think are the other things that constitute GIS? When we say GIS, we can imagine a person sitting in front of a computer, just like me now, clicking away on a piece of software producing maps and tables. This is fairly accurate because GIS is a system composed of people or users, the analysts, hardware, the computers, software, methods, and data. With these components coming together, spatial analysis can be made to tackle spatial questions. Now, I will not talk about details of file formats, specific software, computer specifications, and all that detailed stuff, since we have limited time. You can either read up yourselves or get in touch with us for another more in-depth discussion on these topics. For the remainder of this session, I will talk about the concepts and some practical applications of GIS. The company ESRI or ESRI coined the term science of where. As a problem-solving tool, GIS specializes on problems framed in the context of space. In my background in natural resources conservation, space is a particularly prominent concept as conservation efforts, to be productive and efficient, should be applied to specific locations. Now, physical objects and plans and policies governing our actions can be considered to occupy space or be affected by factors affecting occupying space, and therefore can be looked upon through the lens of GIS. Can issues in your own field be framed into spatial questions? As an illustrative case for this talk, let's talk about a hypothetical but very plausible scenario of an investor looking to set up a renewable energy solar farm. A province is initially identified, and studies are being made around the potential renewable energy project. First, let's look at the investor side of the story. A solar farm has several geophysical requirements that will allow it to maximize the amount of energy harvested from the sun. Overly simplifying for the sake of discussion, a solar farm will need a fairly large expanse of low-lying land with nearly flat topography, away from hilly portions of the land, or at least not to the eastern or western directions. On the other land, if it is sloping, should generally face a north to south direction, and the land should be outside population centers but will still be near to roads for easy access. Now the question is which LGUs would satisfy these criteria, and how much land per local government will be considered suitable. This is a list of this list of criteria is transformed into a checklist of spatial data. Now, what do you think are the kinds of data that we will need? We're looking into the physical requirements of the project site. In my experience, a geophysical characterization is always a basic requirement for any GIS work. A quick visualization of the study site allows us to have an appreciation of the area, and it's almost always cool to see topographic reliefs such as this. Topography data now commonly comes as elevation models, digital elevation models. In the past, topographic maps are large printed maps with contour lines that you will have to trace and digitize to be able to view it on a computer. There are methods now in GIS to produce several derivatives from a single digital elevation model. From this one dataset only, elevation, aspect, and slope can be generated, which plays a major role in the analysis that we have to do for the renewable energy project. Now, for the data on population centers location, satellite images can be downloaded to either one, visually and manually encircle what seems to be the population centers, or do some remote sensing methods to identify pixels that are characteristic of impervious surfaces reminiscent of urban areas. For data on road access, OpenStreetMap provides access to a community-created road data, which are most of the time correct and updated. Now, for the administrative boundaries, NAMRIA provides a non-authoritative dataset, which provides an estimate of the actual administrative boundary. In order to identify areas suitable for renewable energy projects, the list of criteria must be translated into something the computer would understand. Now, for each thematic layer, a binary yes or no decision can be created. For continuous numeric datasets, thresholds can be identified, and for nominal categories, it would be simply checking whether a record matches the set criteria. Simply put, the decision criteria would look something like this. Now, some datasets need additional transformation. For example, road networks are simple lines. And in order to extract information, whether if an area is within or outside the distance mentioned in the list of criteria, we will have to create buffers around the road network. This way, we are transforming line data into polygons, which is typically the same format of the other inputs in this analysis. Each dataset is all the other datasets that are not lines in type are also transformed into binary. Now, all areas satisfying the set criteria are grouped together and separated from those. Sorry, let me read that again. Each dataset is transformed into binary, and all areas that are satisfying the criteria are grouped together and separated from those that do not. Now, in GIS, this process is called the reclassification. On the left, you see here slope. Actually, these two graphics are both slope, but the graphic on the right is reclassified into just two categories. Now, the reclassification allows us to continuous numeric values into nominal categories that, as we have mentioned earlier, is either satisfying or does not satisfy the criteria that we have set. Now, when we do this to all the other data set, for example, for the elevation data, we have a range of elevation values, for example, ranging from 0 to, let's say, 1,000 meters above sea level. We can set the set criteria, for example, in the table earlier mentions that all areas that should be considered must be below 100 meters above sea level. So that's another way of reclassifying the continuous data set from continuous values into just below 100 or above 100 meters above sea level. Now that we have simplified the regions, datasets can be merged into a process generally called overlay. These are logical operations, and the most common of these operations is the intersect and union. And in this case, intersect would make more sense to use, as we should include the administrative boundaries that will set the extent of the analysis. All data outside the local government boundaries will be ignored. So in this example, in this graphic here, we have several local governments spanning several provinces, and if we intersect the study site, we are left with just a small portion that's what we need for the analysis. Now, a typical reclassified input in GIS analysis are simple geometries and attribute tables. As you can see here, this is reclassified elevation data, and we only have two attribute table entries. It says below 100 meters above sea level and above 100 meters above sea level. When we reclassify datasets, most of the time, if the polygons are not too complex in shape, we get a one-to-one correspondence of each feature on the map corresponding to one entry on the attribute table. Now, QGIS is a free and open source GIS software, and the way it combines data is through a pairwise combination of inputs. For example, here we have two inputs at the bottom. We have input 1 and input 2, which is the slope and the aspect. It will give us an intermediate result, which then will be combined with input number 3, which is the administrative boundaries. And it will give us another intermediate result, which we will combine with road data, which we have already buffered, which will now yield the final result. Now, what does the final result look like? With the datasets overlaid, feature shapes and attribute tables are merged into one. On the map, it becomes more like a spaghetti ball full of intersecting edges from every input layer. And on the attribute table, columns of each datasets are appended to make one huge table. Likewise, the resulting table's rows have expanded, and now new features are created for each unique combination of the columns or attributes. At this point, the dataset may no longer have one-to-one correspondence between the map and table rows. But it does not really matter, because when we compute for area for each row of data, it will compute the area for the all the features one row is representing. Mukhang magulo yung yung map, pero okay lang yan. Kasi with the updated attribute table, the criteria that we have previously identified the table the table of criteria, can be applied as an SQL-like query that looks like something like this. This is the format that QGIS use. Now, all the criteria have been transformed into nominal categories. Wala na tayong number na 0 to 100 meters above, 0 to 1,000 meters above sea level. Wala na yun kasi na-reclassify na siya. And now we only have binary categories that's, for example, in this one, below or above 100 meters above sea level. Now, to combine all the criteria all the criteria we have set, we use the text Boolean operator AND, which signify the intersection between attributes or criteria that we have set. Now, all polygon features or the table rows that does not satisfy all of the criteria will be excluded from the selection. Once the selection has been created, we can make another column in the attribute table and label it to whatever we need to label it to separate the selected features from the rest of the data. Now, this is essentially also a reclassification method, and we are getting another binary data, the suitable and unsuitable areas. In this graphic, you'll see the gray areas are the areas that did not satisfy any one of these criteria, and the blue ones satisfy all these areas. And you can see here that right now this doesn't make much sense because it's just a polygon that has something like bluish colors around the edges. But if we use cartography to design the map, we are able to display it visually and communicate the result into a nice, more understandable format. Now, cartography comes in here to help us effectively communicate the analysis that we have created earlier. This map was created by Forester Oziboy Nicopior. Thank you. Instorbo kita kahit ating gabi na kagabi. And as you can see here, by just looking at the map, we can see that the criteria that we have set earlier fairly matches what we can visually see here. Areas, the colored areas, the yellow colored areas that are deemed suitable are at low-lying areas, and there are exclusion sites that are mainly the populated areas. Now, syempre meron tayong map. Of course, we will have some sort of tabular summaries then. The output requiring the tabulated results showing distribution of suitable areas in each LGU can often be produced in a spreadsheet software. So we just export the attribute table and manipulate it in a spreadsheet so that we can generate whatever summaries that we need. So in this case, we have just a simple listing, a table showing suitable and unsuitable project sites for each local government in the province. Of course, we can generate figures of these tables. The one on the left side shows the suitable areas in percentage per municipality, and the table on top right are suitable areas in terms of the slope, and at the bottom are the areas suitable for the project site in terms of elevation. Now, let us look through the local government's perspective. Everything that I will discuss here will be hypothetical and is probably exaggerated to illustrate the role of GIS in decision-making and policy-making in the context of spatial land use and land cover impacts to the LGU. While installation of renewable energy farms provide several benefits to the local government, decision to allow this kind of industry will have to be based on evidence that benefits will outweigh detriment. In this case, let's look at two facets of this decision-making process. First is the impact to the environment, and second is the impact to the current and future land use within the local government. In the previous analysis, we identified suitable areas only in terms of topography. Of course, land is almost impossibly not is almost impossibly not barren. Something must be on it. Kasi, syempre, may tumutubo diyang halaman kung ano man, di ba? In order to identify what will be affected, what kind of data layers do you think we will need? On the left is land cover, and on the right is a representation of land use. So of course, we will need the output of the previous analysis because it shows us where the potential project sites will be, and we should join them or overlay them in this land cover and land use data to tell us which areas or what kind of land use or land cover will be affected. Land cover tells us what is physically present on site according to general categories identified by NAMRIA. And I will be particularly interested whether the identified sites are forests, agriculture, or urban. Now, actually, aside from what is physically present, the local government have existing plans embodied in their land use plans projected for several years. I'd be also particularly interested if whether these identified areas will overlap to space projected or reserved for agriculture, urban, or other natural land uses. Now, I will not go again to the details on how to analyze this, as this is very similar to the previous analysis discussed, and it just uses another set of data set. Now, as a tool for location-based analysis, GIS brings to the table important insights for planners, researchers, and policymakers. This is the case that we're exploring, and we focused into the land use planning, and as these kinds of projects, the renewable kind, the solar renewable energy kind, that might have a lasting impact on several facets of land use. First is the actual changes in land use, and second is preparing the local government for potential influx of industries of the same nature in the future. I imagine crafting policies for such industries will be a huge undertaking, as there will be several stringed issues that will surely arise if one is allowed to operate. Now, how will it impact agriculture and irrigation? How will it impact wildlife, especially if there are migratory species present? How will it impact the local economy? And what existing local and national policies may be impacted by setting up such industry? More and more, we realize that the spatial context is needed to create more targeted and responsive policies. To wrap things up, today we talked about the overview of GIS and how to map features and tabular data, and how the map features and tabular data are integrated in GIS. And we saw how typical spatial analysis is conducted, starting from criteria setting to dataset reclassification into spatial overlays. And we talked about how data is dressed and presented using cartography, and look at how raw data can be transformed into easily digestible summaries. Finally, we related how GIS can contribute to policymaking by making spatial queries available for local decision makers. And with the power of GIS, framing questions in the current in the context of space for policy making will enable us to fine-tune our policies to be more responsive and targeted. I hope I was able to add to your knowledge given the limited time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Forster Leo, for that very informative presentation. So for our participants, we hope that Forster Leo's presentation has been very informative on your part, and also inspire you to seek more information about GIS and its application. So for our open forum, your Q&A, I would like to call on Dr. Len Bugayong to moderate and read the questions for our speaker. Doc Len?
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. So thank you, Leo, for the very informative presentation. And we have a few questions here for you to answer. The first one is from our friend from CAPS, Institute of Animal Science, I think. Uh, could Could GIS be used also in animal production? Example for plans for establishing a poultry or wine farm? Is it also possible?
Thank you for the question. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's about framing the question into a spatial question. And when we talk about, for example, the requirements of poultry farms or whatever kind of farm, we need to it would need some sort of spatial requirements. For example, yung mga piggery ba, gaano ba siya dapat kalayo sa mga tao? Or yung mga poultry farms, gaano pa siya dapat kalayo sa mga tao? What kind of will it need irrigation? Saan ba siya pwedeng when you're able to ask saan ba siya pwedeng ilagay, automatic pasok ang GIS sa ganung klaseng analysis. So yes, the answer to your question is yes, definitely GIS can be applied to your field.
Thank you, Leo. I hope na-answer yung question ng ating friend from CAPS. And then there's another question from Science La Vega. GIS makes the life of planners easier. Is this software also available even to simple people like farmers? And there's also a related question. Teka lang ha. Some satellite images are hard or very expensive to obtain. What can you recommend a substitute or other sources of image that we can use? So I think it's about the cost also of the technology or the software.
Yes, I'd like to answer the first question first. Yung kung available ba sa farmers ang software. Yes, of course, it will be available because it's free, especially QGIS. But will the farmers need ba yung software? To me, if simple farmers will, simple farmers will need products of GIS more than the software. So it's kumbaga parang yung extension work natin as reps, we can create we can translate their needs and we can do all the analysis and provide them the outputs the products that they would need. Kumbaga merong mga farmers na advanced, for example sa ibang bansa, they use GIS and remote sensing to identify which parts of their farms are yung mas nangangailangan ng pataba. So they use GIS and remote sensing for that. But for example, here in the Philippines, na we're thinking about farmers sa mga far-flung areas, I think the products of GIS, for example, suitability analysis or or basta yung mga products yung mas magagamit nila. I don't think the software or the methods will be useful, that much useful to them. Now for the second question about the availability of satellite images, since hindi ko maalala kung kailang year na release, pero freely available ang iba sa mga magagandang satellite images. For example, yung what's the name? Of course, Landsat 8 is free for everyone's use, and also yung teka, nalimutan ko yung pangalan, hanapin ko lang.
That's okay.
Okay, teka, titingnan ko lang.
So
Sentinel, that's it. Sentinel-2 is freely available also for everyone's use, and it has 10-meter resolution na for general remote sensing purposes is already quite mataas na yung resolution. Ayun.
So, Leo, it's available
So yes,
for free.
the answer to that question, yes, the answer to that question is maraming available na satellite images that we can use for free.
Okay, thank you. For those who want to know more about which of the agencies we can go to para makahingi ng free satellite images, you can just message Forester Leo. Another question is on the use of GIS in determining different forest land uses or land cover. Is there a standard protocol in assigning colors? Yung sa mapping kasi, di ba?
Colors, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Sa akin, of course, NAMRIA has a standard, always use the same colors for their maps, and for maps that needs to suit yung kumbaga yung national standard, I would use the coloring method na ginagamit ng NAMRIA. So yes, you can use their standard color, but you can use your own. Now, meron din palang yung HLURB, they have some sort of recommended colors for coloring land uses for CLUPs, and yun yung sinunod namin nung nakaraan sa mga projects na ginawa namin. So yes, the answer is merong standard na merong recommended pero hindi naman siya standard.
So, pwede natin gamitin yung sa NAMRIA para lahat ng mga maps natin medyo pare-pareho yung colors ng iba't ibang land use. And then we have another question. How adequate are the policies today as far as application of GIS in planning, implementation, and enforcement of natural resources management and development? So yung question,
can you repeat po, ma'am? Medyo nag-choppy din.
How adequate are the policies today as far as the application of GIS in planning, implementation, and enforcement of natural resources management and development? Meron daw ba tayong policies dun sa paggamit ng GIS sa planning and implementation and law enforcement probably?
Mahirap yung tanong na yan.
Doon sa HLURB, hindi na pala
Yes.
HLURB, they have policies for the land use planning, no?
Yes, actually matagal na doon sa pilot testing namin dati ng DRM for local governments, sinusubukang ipa-integrate na actually sa local governments yung paggamit ng GIS. Pero hindi ko alam kung ano status niya ngayon, kung siya ba ay mandated na ba yung mga local government na gamitin. Pero nakakatuwa dito, karamihan doon sa mga naging participants namin noon, and even doon sa mga ibang trainings na ginawa namin, on their own, nagsisimula na silang mag-implement ng GIS sa kanilang local government plans. Kaya I think even without the government saying that they should adopt, people are already adapting because they see the power of GIS.
Yeah. Marami din kaming nakita ng mga LGUs. They have very nice land use plans na merong magagandang mapa based on GIS. Mga satellites na mga ginamit nila, mas ano pa nga, advanced yung iba eh. So it's already being implemented in many LGUs.
Yes.
Another question is, can you use GIS to monitor or prevent illegal activities like timber poaching, illegal logging, deforestation, and others in the forest?
Actually, depending on the scale of monitoring that you would like to do, it can be possible. So when we say resolution, we're talking about spatial resolution, meaning gaano ba kalaki yung area na kailangan mong i-monitor and how much data are you able to collect over those areas. And temporal resolution, gaano ka kadalas mag-conduct ng monitoring. So for example, if I'm making a daily monitoring of a patch of forest inside on the fringes, for example, of Mount Makiling, I will be able to detect changes in canopies kung araw-araw ko siyang kukunan. But it would be resource intensive. So if I do something like monthly visits or monthly gathering of satellite images over the area, well, I can still make a trend analysis para makita yung changes. And yes, it would be very possible. It would be possible, but we have to consider yung resources na kakailanganin para ma-conduct yung ganitong klase ng monitoring. But yes, very possible.
Yeah, I think DNR is already using I think a program to monitor the activities in the forest, especially in determining the changes in the land use within the forest. Here's another question from former Director Celso Diaz. During this time of COVID pandemic, how can GIS be applied effectively if we follow quarantine protocols?
Good question. Ganyan. GIS is all about space kasi. And I think GIS can play an important role in contact tracing. Now, sa ngayon kasi parang wala akong nakikita na kumbaga parang real time and super updated na maps or graphics showing saan yung mga areas na merong concentration ng infection. Pero sa palagay ko merong paraan para i-apply sa contact tracing ang GIS. Merong app yung government, I forgot which government branch, yung medyo napaghinalaan na masyadong intrusive because it will require the user to allow the app to access the mobile phone's location and even yung call and text yata. So medyo naging controversial siya. But if we really have to do that, ewan ko lang. Naalala ko tuloy yung movie ni Christopher Nolan, yung Batman. Ginamit ni Batman yung audio ng mga bawat cellphone ng lahat ng tao sa Gotham City para hanapin kung nasan si Joker. So kumbaga, nahanap niya si Joker, pero at what cost? Privacy ng mga tao. So there's a balance pa rin. But of course, GIS as spatial technology can be too much powerful. Ayun.
Meron din, Sir Celso Diaz, we also have programs doon sa DSWD and DILG. Meron silang mga ginawang mga programs to determine where yung mga services are, public services for COVID-related na mga cases. Also, si June, nag-develop siya ng map to show where are the points lang naman yung ginawa niya, parang red dots in the map of Laguna where the COVID positive cases are. So isang sample lang yon.
Yes.
Pag tinignan mo yung mapa, parang ma-identify mo which barangays are the high density for COVID cases. So may mga ganun po, sir, tayo na mga applications ng GIS. And then there's another question here, Leo. Do you offer tutorials or can you recommend references that we could use to learn how to use a GIS program like QGIS? I can see its importance in my work as a researcher, but I'm not an expert in using the software.
Baka FDC can make tutorial series for this.
Baka ikaw.
Ipa-plug ko naman, meron kaming company, Grids, that we offer such kind of trainings. So you can contact us for trainings, and we're actually developing online materials. Soon mag-launch din yan.
So I think meron din sa SESAM eh. I saw one group sa SESAM nag-offer din sila ng training on GIS. So if there are other questions, you may click the button of raise hands here at Zoom. So if you want to ask questions, we're waiting for you. Meron ba? Other questions? Let's see the Q&A. Thank you, Dao, for answering the question of science. Thank you, science.
You're welcome.
Ano pa? Meron pa bang ibang questions? Very interesting yung shinare ni Leo. I think we learn a lot from that, from him, and mas madami pa sigurong application ang GIS towards decision and policy making. We're seeing the effect of having science-based policy making, yung interface between science and policy making, which makes it more effective siguro, more efficient tayo paggawa ng policy based on science, the results of research. There's another question here. Oh, thank you daw from Sir Celso Diaz, retired researcher natin siya from ERDB. So if there are no more questions, I turn over the microphone to Raymond for the rest of the program. Thank you. Raymond.
Thank you, Tita Len. Okay, so for the next part of our program, I'd like to present the certificate. So before that, I'd like to thank the questions from our participants. So participants and other Facebook Live viewers. Hopefully, Leo was able to answer them the best that he can. Okay, so for the next part, I'd like to present the certificate. Yes, kindly flash it. So while we're waiting, can you flash the certificate? Yeah, okay. So the Forestry Development Center, College of Forestry and Natural Resources, University of the Philippines, Los Baños, in cooperation with the UP Reps Division 4, presents this certificate of appreciation to Forester Leonardo Barua for serving as speaker on the topic Geographic Information Towards Decision and Policy Making. So presented during the Forest Policy eTalks FDC webinar series of 2020. On July 22, 2020, organized by the FDC and UP Reps Division 4, with support from the Information Technology Center of UPLB, signed later by Dean Willie P. Abasolo, College of Forestry, Natural Resources, Dr. Priscilla C. Delon, Director of the Forestry Development Center, and Leilani A. Castillo, the Chair of the UP Reps Division 4. So, thank you, Forester Leo. Is your certificate. The signed copy will be forwarded later. Okay. So before we finish this webinar, which I think has been highly informative and really aroused our curiosity to study more GIS, I'd like to make some announcements. Okay, so I'd like to invite you for next week, which will be the same time, 10 a.m. But the date is July 28th. It will be we'll be celebrating the 42nd Forestry Development Center anniversary. So we will celebrate this by hosting a policy forum with the theme Adaptive Forest and Environmental Policies in response to COVID-19 pandemic. Our resource speaker would be Dr. Rex Victor Cruz, NAST academician and UPLB professor, and also former chancellor of UPLB. And his topic is integrated area land use planning and development to help minimize public health risks and more. So do tune in do visit our website, Forestry Development Center, CFNR UPLB, our Facebook page for more details for this upcoming webinar and policy forum. So link will be posted later. So we hope that you can also join us for this activity to celebrate our anniversary. Okay, so before we end, I would like to encourage everyone to please answer our post evaluation. So after leaving this this webinar, you will be redirected to our evaluation, and after you answer it, we will send to you via email your e-certificate. So e-certificates will be given after answering the evaluation. So before we end this, anything else? Okay, so the link is also posted to the chat box, so you can click it. So to end this, I would like to pray and tell you that just keep safe and see you on our next policy e-talks. Thank you very much for joining us, everyone. Thank you, Forester Leo, for serving as resource speaker. And stay safe, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.